this point in time, relations are not good, and they certainly don't seem to be improving anytime soon, Allison.
All right, CNN's Frederick Pleiken, live from Moscow. Thanks very much.
President Trump going on to defend his decision to keep trade active with China, pointing to the North Korea threat and telling the Times, China's hurting us very badly on trade, but I have been soft on China because the only thing more important to me than trade is war. Excuse me, Allison. The first time Mr. Trump has directly admitted being easier on China.
Of course, it is in hopes of that they pressure Pyongyang to stop its advancement of nuclear weapons. The president calling North Korea, quote, a nuclear menace, which is no good for China.
Trump's comments came hours after he accused the Chinese of secretly shipping oil to North Korea. The president tweeted, caught red-handed, very disappointed that China is allowing oil to go into North Korea. There will never be a friendly solution to the North Korea problem if this continues to happen. The president says if China doesn't help with North Korea, he could still take action on trade. Trump was asked by the Times how recently the possible oil transfer happened, and he said it was very recently. In fact, I hate to say, it was reported Thursday morning on Fox. CNN's Alex Field is live in Beijing. Alex, this is going to get quite a reaction from Xi Jinping. When was the last time, and what is the intelligence on Chinese shipments of oil to North Korea?
Well, the president may have been watching reports on this on Fox just on Thursday, but certainly this is something that government agencies have been following and have been aware of for some time now. It was, even back in November, where you had the Treasury, the U.S. Treasury, talking about the possibility of North Korea working to skirt the raft of sanctions against the rogue regime by using an illegal network of ships in order to try and bring oil into the country. The very bold accusation from President Trump now is that China is allowing that to happen. That tweet, again, saying that China has been caught red-handed, came on the heels of a South Korean media report in which media reported that there were satellite images that showed Chinese ships transferring oil to North Korean ships. That is, of course, a flagrant violation of the resolutions and the sanctions that are aimed at curbing and curtailing the resources and the revenue streams that flow into North Korea and fund that regime. Look, officials in Beijing certainly not taking this lying down in response to those South Korean media reports and in response to questions about the president's tweet today. Officials have again said that they are fully upholding and implementing all UN Security Council sanctions and resolutions. They went on to say that if they had any clear evidence of Chinese ships or companies acting illegally, defying these sanctions, that those companies and those individual vessels would be dealt with. So is this happening? China says no, but South Korean officials say they've got further evidence. In fact, they say that back in November, they actually seized a ship that had left a port in South Korea. It's a ship that's registered to Hong Kong, leased by a company in Taiwan, and they say that that ship had gone into international waters and transferred oil to North Korean vessels. Evidence, they say, of this illegal network. The very thing that the president is now saying he's drawing attention to, something he says he won't tolerate. We'll see where it goes from here, Dave.
Sure will be an interesting next 24 hours. Alexandra Field live for us, 6:06 p.m. there in Beijing. Thanks. Joining us now to talk about all of this and making her early start debut, CNN Politics multi-platform editor Brenna Williams. Good morning to you, Brenna, and welcome to the show.
Good morning, welcome.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
Appreciate you getting up awfully early. We're still combing through the gold that is this New York Times interview with the president. So much to get to, including the fact that we, as the media, will basically have to let the president win re-election in 2020. What's your headline from this 30-minute chat with Michael Schmidt?
Where to begin? I think the one thing that really stood out to me is the fact that he mentions that he wants to be bipartisan on some of these big deals that he's looking to make moving forward. I mean, obviously tax reform kind of went through without that bipartisan deal, but he mentions infrastructure, he mentions DACA. He says that he wants to be bipartisan on some of these big deals while simultaneously slamming Joe Manchin, who is one of the more moderate Democrats in the Senate. So it's interesting. As with most storylines dealing with the president, it's kind of a tale of, both sides of the spectrum.
Something that stood out to me, the president taking a not-so-subtle shot at Jeff Sessions. You'll remember Sessions recused himself from the special counsel's Russia investigation months ago after it came to light that he met with Russia's ambassador during the campaign. Trump saying this, I have absolute right to do what I want to do with the Justice Department, but for purposes of hopefully thinking I'm going to be treated fairly, I've stayed uninvolved with this particular matter. First of all, Can he really have the absolute right to do whatever he wants to do with the Justice Department just because he's the president of the United States?
No.
In short.
Just make it.
Yeah, in short, no. You can't just do whatever you want. There are obviously things in place to keep you from doing whatever you want. I mean, as well as public opinion and keeping that in mind. I think the thing that was interesting to me about this piece is that he mentions the Hillary Clinton emails and deleting 33,000 emails, which was a line that was mentioned on the campaign trail multiple times, and since 2016 will never go away. But the fact that he mentions that, but then says, but I'm not getting involved with this, I'm not getting involved. And I think it was really interesting that he said, I believe the quote was, "It's too bad that Sessions recused himself from the Russia investigation." And he goes on to talk about how former Attorney General Eric Holder was very loyal to Obama, very loyal to President Obama.
Let's talk about that, because that was the next thing I wanted to ask you about. He says that Eric Holder totally protected President Obama. When you look at the IRS scandal, when you look at the guns for whatever, these were real problems, and Holder protected the president. I have great respect for that, I'll be honest. I have great respect for that. What do you make of the president suddenly complimenting Eric Holder and this loyalty he showed President Obama?
Well, if there's one thing that we know about President Trump, it's that loyalty is the most important thing to him. Loyalty above anything else. I mean, he says it all the time. It's been, something that's come up with multiple members of the cabinet. And we know that that is the most important thing to him. So even though, Eric Holder's a Democrat, President Obama's a Democrat, he showed loyalty, which is the number one thing that is important to President Trump. And I was not surprised at all to see that, he valued that in someone else, even if it was somebody from the other party. But the fact that he said that it's too bad that his own attorney general felt that he needed to recuse himself, again, goes to kind of some of the tension that we've seen there between, President Trump and really anything having to do with this Russia investigation.
You know what strikes me about this interview is just how it came about. No aides sitting by him just sort of chatting it up in the grill.
As one does.
Yeah, I mean, it's really amazing. And then of course you think about what he said. He gave himself several pats on the back for one saying about knowing taxes better than a CPA. I know the details of taxes better than anybody, better than the greatest CPA. I know the details of healthcare better than most. If he knows taxes better than anybody, I want him to do my taxes. Better yet, let me see his taxes, huh?
Well, okay, I think one thing that we do know is what are you guaranteed in life? Death, taxes, and the fact that Donald Trump will probably not release his own taxes. So I think that it was fascinating to me that we didn't get an end-of-the-year press conference, which is tradition, right? Instead, he sat down with the New York Times, which is not his favorite news outlet, and talked to them for 30 minutes without any aides. I believe the Washington Post reported that when asked about the interview, someone said, "What interview?" Right? So just somebody from the, quote, failing New York Times, in his words, was able to sit down with the President of the United States and just chat it up for 30 minutes instead of having a formal, end-of-the-year interview, press conference where multiple outlets got to ask him questions. That was one of the most fascinating things to me, that you can just walk up to him at the grill. Some of his friends stopped by, were chatting. It's just have it shooting words.
Shooting the breeze.
Shooting the breeze, yeah.
He's right about one thing. He is selling copies of the New York Times because people are going to pick up this paper this morning.
If you haven't read it, the transcript, you want to read the transcript. It goes on.
It's fascinating.
Really
is.
Absolutely.
Brenna Williams, thanks so much. We'll see you in about 30 minutes.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, some horrific news right here in New York City.
Is the worst fire tragedy we have seen in this city in at least a quarter century.
12 people dead in
25 years. At least 12 people were killed, including a 1-year-old. Officials say the fire started on the first floor of an apartment building just before 7 o'clock last night near the Bronx Zoo. Firefighters arrived within 3 minutes, battling flames and frigid temperatures, but the fire quickly spread to the top floors.
We're here at the scene of an unspeakable tragedy. In the middle of the holiday season is a time when families are together, Tonight here in the Bronx, there are families that have been torn apart.
This tragedy is, without question, historic in its magnitude here. And our hearts go out to every family that lost a loved one here and everyone that's fighting for their lives.
As do ours. Officials say the victims range from 50 years old, and we mentioned that 1-year-old. We have a live report in the Bronx next half hour. Also, Mayor Bill de Blasio will be on New Day this morning.
Okay, Apple apologizing to customers for how it rolled out an update that could slow down older iPhones. To make up for it, the company will offer cheaper battery replacements. On their website, Apple posting a long explanation saying, "We know that some of you feel Apple has let you down. We apologize. First and foremost, we have never and would never do anything to intentionally shorten the life of any Apple product." To make amends, Apple will temporarily drop the price of replacement batteries to $29 beginning in late January. The price will go back up to the usual $79 in 2019. A lot of customers upset with the company about a software update which deliberately slowed down older phones in some situations to extend battery life. Some actually thought it was a ploy to get you to upgrade to new devices. A number of people around the world have even filed lawsuits over the feature and are seeking class action status.
With final preparations underway for New Year's Eve, authorities in New York have a close eye on two big factors: security and the weather. Athena Jones, braving the bitter cold for us, has more from Times Square.
Good morning, Allison and Dave. The New Year's Eve celebration here in Times Square is an iconic event. It's also a massive security challenge, and it's one the NYPD, working with state, local, and federal officials, is used to undertaking. The police commissioner said that preparations for this year's event began as the last of the confetti was being swept up after last year's celebration. We're told there will be an increased police presence this year, and that's due in part to the two recent terror attacks right here in New York. This entire area will be sealed off to traffic starting early in the day, and the 12 access points that spectators will use to access this area will be manned by teams of police. There'll be police with heavy weapons. There will be dogs that are capable of detecting radiological material. There will also be sanitation trucks and cement blocks to help seal off the area. Now, authorities, the mayor, the police commissioner on down, all say that there is no direct credible threat to Times Square or to New York City, but that everyone should remain vigilant. Now, based on last year's numbers, we could see up to 2 million people out here celebrating on Sunday night, ringing in 2018, although that number might be diminished slightly by the fact that this is expected to be the coldest New Year's Eve in 55 years. The mayor warned folks to pay attention to that weather, bundle up, take precautions if they're planning to come out and celebrate. Allison, Dave.
Okay, Athena, good advice. The entertainment world mourning the loss of legendary actress Rose Marie.
If he's old or young or short or tall, he's my cup of tea. Santa, Cinderella to me.
Rose Marie was best known for her role as Sally Rogers on The Dick Van Dyke Show. She also had a long run on the game show Hollywood Squares. Marie's career spanning 9 decades, beginning as a child star in the 20s and 30s. She earned 3 Emmy nominations and was given a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame in 2001. Rose Marie was 94 years old.
Well, in case you haven't noticed, it is freezing cold outside. The obvious answer is more global warming. We end 2017 the way we spent so much of it, reading bizarre tweets from the President of the United States, in this case confusing local weather with global climate.
Resolution number 1, binge more. Join the Uncarrier and get 4 unlimited lines for only $40 each.
Climate change could be a good thing, apparently not realizing climate change and local weather are, well, not exactly the same thing. That was on vacation in sunny Florida where it was in the mid-70s. The president fired off this tweet. In the East, it could be the coldest New Year's Eve on record. Perhaps we could use a little bit of that good old global warming that our country, but not other countries, was going to pay trillions of dollars to protect us against. Bundle up. The president's tweet further distancing his climate policy from the vast majority of scientists.
Mr. Trump has a history of linking the temperature in any one place to the existence of climate change, something climate scientists have long said is inaccurate. Worth pointing out, though, the president's golf course in Ireland recently received permission to build seawalls to prevent erosion. The president's company cited global warming on its application for the walls.
So just how much colder will it get in this final weekend of 2017? Meteorologist Derek Van Dam has our New Year's forecast.
Good Friday morning, Dave and Ellison. If you are headed out to watch the ball drop in Times Square this weekend, bundle up, bring every piece of winter gear that you own. 11 degrees, that's the official midnight forecast. When you factor in the wind, it'll feel like a mere 3 below zero. And this puts it at the coldest New Year's Eve forecast in New York City since 1962. It could top out in the top 3 ever. The coldest ever, by the way, was set in 1917, where it was only 1 lonely degree in Times Square. This is a setup. Frigid Arctic air settling in across the eastern half of the country. We do have a chance of snow today from Chicago into Grand Rapids, Michigan. National Weather Service has once again issued wind chill warnings and advisory from upstate New York right through Maine. That will likely be reissued into the weekend. Check out these wind chill temperatures right now, well below freezing from Boston into New York, Portland, only 11 in Pittsburgh, 6 right now near Cleveland. Actual temperatures, not much more promising. For New Year's Eve, 14 degrees for Chicago, 26 in D.C. Atlanta, you're running at least 20 degrees below where you should be this time of year. And by the way, chances of more lake effect snow this weekend. Back to you.
Should be wicked. Thank you, Derek. Well, we've only got about 30 minutes left in this program. Not nearly enough time to discuss everything the president said that raises eyebrows in this New York Times interview. Why he's going easy on China, what he thinks about the special counsel, and some harsh words once again for his own attorney general. Early start right back after the break. China will stun you. We have live coverage and reaction to the president's comments straight ahead.
And a holiday season tragedy in the Bronx. At least a dozen people killed in the deadliest apartment fire in New York City in a quarter century. Welcome back to Early Start. I'm Allison Cossack.
I'm Dave Briggs. 30 minutes past the hour. It's a fascinating interview in the New York Times. Among the nuggets, the media will basically have to let Donald Trump win re-election in 2020, but so much more to get to. After weeks of watching his allies try to discredit the special counsel's investigation, President Trump giving Robert Mueller the benefit of the doubt. He says he thinks the special counsel will treat him fairly. Mr. Trump sitting down with the New York Times for this impromptu interview at his golf club in Palm Beach.
On Russia, the president took a very different tone than many in the Republican Party. Here's New York Times reporter Michael Shear on CNN last night. Listen.
He thought Bob Mueller was going to be fair to him, which really undercuts and undermines an argument that many in his party have been making for the last several weeks, that they've been attempting to discredit and undermine Mueller's investigation, calling it partisan. So this kind of goes against that. But at the same time, as you said, the president repeated a lot of the complaints and criticisms that he's had about the investigation.
Among those complaints, the investigation is bad for the country. President Trump told the Times it makes the country look very bad, and it puts the country in a very bad position. So the sooner it's worked out, the better it is for the country.
President Trump also told the newspapers 16 times in 30 minutes there was no collusion with Russia. He also says some congressmen have been, quote, unbelievable in pointing out what a witch hunt the whole investigation is, and that his base is even stronger than ever.
The president's comments coming amid rising tensions between the U.S. and Russia, the tone growing more confrontational the last few days over a series of issues. CNN's senior international correspondent Frederick Pleiken is live in Moscow. Good morning to you, Fred. So what is the Kremlin saying about this sort of eye-opening New York Times interview with President Trump?
Yeah, they certainly have commented on it, and they generally also commented on relations between the U.S. and Russia. It was quite interesting. This coming from the spokesman for Vladimir Putin, Dmitry Peskov, who, in a call that we were on as well, stated that he believes that U.S.-Russia relations is one of the major disappointments of this past year. So you can clearly see how the Kremlin feels about how things are evolving between the U.S. and Russia. They also commented directly on this interview that the president gave, especially regarding the Mueller investigation. There, Dmitry Peskov, the same spokesman, saying that the Russians have repeatedly stated their opinion on what they call the anti-Russian hysteria that is fomented and maintained in the U.S., and they also say they are perplexed by the ongoing investigation. They went on to say this is, of course, an internal affair of the United States, but in this case, of course, this is damaging to our bilateral relations, and the Russians say that they do regret this. So actually quite a similar tone to the one that the president took. Him, of course, also saying that he believes this is weakening the United States. The Russians have repeatedly said that as well. They said that they believe that this is embarrassing for the U.S., and the Russians, of course, continue to maintain that they did not meddle in the elections in the United States in 2016. But it certainly seems as though the Russians, it's sort of dawning on them now that this investigation is not going away, and also that the whole complex of U.S.-Russia relations is not going to improve very quickly, Allison.
And this certainly not going away. Interesting that that the Russians are calling it anti-Russian hysteria here in the U.S. All right, CNN's Fred Pleitgen, thanks very much.
So President Trump going on to defend his decision to keep trade active with China, pointing to the North Korea threat, telling the Times, China is hurting us very badly on trade, but I have been soft on China because the only thing more important to me than trade is war.
It is the first time Mr. Trump has directly admitted being easier on China in hopes they pressure Pyongyang to stop its advancement of nuclear weapons. The president calling North Korea, quote, a nuclear menace, which is no good for China.
President Trump's comments came hours after he accused the Chinese of secretly shipping oil to North Korea. The president tweeting, caught red-handed, very disappointed that China is allowing oil to go into North Korea. There will never be a friendly solution to the North Korea problem if this continues to happen. The president says China, if they don't help with North Korea, he could still take action on trade. Trump asked by the Times how recently the possible oil transfer happened, and he said, it was very recently. In fact, I hate to say it, it was reported Thursday morning on Fox. Not sure why he hates to say it, but CNN's Alex Field live for us in Beijing. What is the intelligence on the Chinese shipping oil to North Korea?
Yeah, look, this is something that officials from a number of countries have been looking at longer than just Thursday with this Fox News report, of course. We know that Pyongyang has provided nearly constant provocations over the course of the last year. The international community has responded with a raft of sanctions against North Korea aimed at curtailing and cutting those resources, those sources of revenue. But the reality here that the international community is also aware of is a question of whether or not North Korea is finding ways to skirt those sanctions, to specifically get the oil that they need for their economy, also for their military. One way to do that is to work through these illegal shipping networks. And the president very boldly accusing China on Twitter of allowing this network to happen in the waters off of North Korea. His accusation essentially that North Korea is getting oil, that China's allowing it to happen, and that it's happening in these ship-to-ship transfers. These are, of course, prohibited by the UN Security Council's resolutions. China is denying this. They responded to these claims earlier this week, actually, when South Korean media outlets published reports that there were satellite images showing Chinese vessels transferring oil to North Korean vessels. Chinese officials here in Beijing have said that China is doing its part to fully uphold and implement all sanctions against North Korea. And they say that if they find any evidence of ships or companies participating in forbidden activities, that they would deal with those specific entities. However, South Korean authorities are insisting they have evidence of an illegal network. In fact, they say they seized a ship back in November, a ship that was registered to Hong Kong that was being leased by a company in Taiwan. They say that ship had left a port in South Korea, traveled into international waters, and provided oil to North Korean vessels. That now under investigation. Dave?
Just when things were quieting down, further ratcheted back up. Alex Field live for us tonight in Beijing. Thanks.
Okay, let's go back to CNN Politics multi-platform editor Brenna Williams to talk more in depth about this interview that President Trump did with the New York Times, kind of out of nowhere. You know, the media didn't get a year-end news conference, but we got this 30-minute interview transcribed in the New York Times. And during this 30 minutes, it just felt like it was one of these interviews where it was like a stream of consciousness. If you read through the transcribed text of it, where we even kind of get a bird's eye view into where the president sits on the political spectrum, where he was talking about DACA and not being centered. He said, no, I'm not being centered. I'm just being practical. No, I don't think I'm changing. Look, I wouldn't do a DACA plan without a wall because we need it. We see the drugs pouring into the country. We need the wall. I'm always moving. I'm moving in both directions. I guess we can sort of intimate there, moving in both directions, meaning from Republican to Democrat. Is that what we can surmise?
So I think the thing to remember is that, first and foremost, the president is a businessman. He's always going to pair give with take. He wants his wall, and Democrats want, and many Republicans in Congress want to work on DACA, but you can't get anything with Donald Trump without giving a little bit. So I think that that's interesting. I would not say that he's making a radical swing to the left by any means, but no, I mean, I was also fascinated by just how wide-ranging this interview was, and I mean, every line there was something to dig into. That's one thing you can say for President Trump, is that he, everything out of his mouth is something that you want to pay attention to. Everything that he tweets, everything that comes from his thumbs, is something that you want to pay attention to. So, for better or for worse, everything that he said is something that we're going to be talking about for, probably the next few days. Like you said, we didn't get an end of the year press conference. This is basically what we get. So.
It's interesting you mentioned that no end of the year press conference, but what we're here is that he wanted to give one, and it's clear from this interview that he wants to talk, that he has an awful lot to say. He wants to defend his accomplishments. He wants to discuss these things. He might be better suited to do it, except when he goes on and says this about the Justice Department, quote, "I have absolute right to do what I want to do with the Justice Department, but for purposes of hopefully thinking I'm going to be treated fairly, I've stayed involved with this particular matter." That's when asked about if he would investigate Hillary's emails. Does the President of the United States have the right to do whatever he wants to do with the Department of Justice?
No, like I said earlier, it's you can't just do anything you want, even though you're the president, without, angering members of Congress, without angering the public. I mean, he is still the elected president of the United States. He still answers to the voters, even though later on in the interview, he essentially says that the press is who's going to let him win again in 2020. So that was fascinating to me, because I was unaware, I don't know about you guys, that the press chooses the president, but that was the implication there. I still think it's the voters, but he had a lot to say. But yeah, he can't just do whatever he wants, despite what he may imply. But even so, if he does think that he can do whatever he wants, it's good that he's showing restraint in this particular matter.
Another standout point from the interview that I found was this not-so-subtle jab he took at Jeff Sessions, who recused himself from the special counsel's Russia investigation. In this interview, he says, "It's too bad Jeff recused himself. I like Jeff, but it's too bad he recused himself. I don't want to get into loyalty, but I will say this. Holder protected President Obama, totally protected him. When you look at the IRS scandal, when you look at the guns for whatever, these were real problems. And Holder protected the president. And I have great respect for that. I'll be honest, I have great respect for that." He's trying to get a message here across, isn't he?
Yeah, not so subtle, which while, being a good businessman is his forte, being subtle, probably not. And there's been tension between Donald Trump and Attorney General Sessions almost since the beginning. He's not been happy about that recusal from the Russia investigation. He hasn't been super quiet about that. But I think it's really interesting that, he values loyalty so much that he even admires it in the other party, and goes on to compliment former Attorney General Holder, and he says that, he really appreciates that loyalty. And we do know, that loyalty is the number one thing with President Trump. If you're unloyal to him, you may be on the chopping block, and we've known that.
Yeah, he loves loyalty. He loves numbers as well, telling Michael Schmidt he has 158 million people from various social media platforms. He won't love the number. I think the most common word in the transcript is inaudible. I lost count at 18.
Apparently it was noisy in the grill where the interview was going
on.
Well,
perhaps that's the reason.
Well, the thing that fascinated...
My highlighter ran out. But before we go, I want to ask you, because it's our last show of 2017, and you have a new piece coming out. Not everything in 2017 was an utter dumpster fire. Tell us what you mean by that, and cite some examples.
So 2017, like 2016, was kind of a rough year, but there were some kind of heartwarming moments that we all witnessed kind of as a country together. I mean, obviously there's that terrible shooting back this summer on the Republican baseball team, and I thought that one of the more heartwarming moments was when Steve Scalise came out and threw out the first pitch at the Nationals game. I thought that was a wonderful moment, and everyone was very supportive of that. And then Senator John McCain, obviously he's dealing with his cancer diagnosis, and whenever he returned to the floor, he returned for a very controversial vote on procedures on the Obamacare vote, but he received a bipartisan applause. And you know, there's a lot of infighting and a lot of partisanship in Washington, but you know, John McCain served his country, and he's, you know, did so in the military, he did so in the Senate for years and years, and I think that it was really nice that that was recognized. First Lady Melania Trump visited Children's Hospital in Rome, and only hours later, one of the little boys she talked to was told that he was going to get the heart transplant that he needed. And I mean, literally warming my heart, right? It was great. So, you know, there were a lot of low moments in 2017, but there were some real moments of light as well. So
thank you for that.
Sounds like a great piece.
We needed that. Thank you. Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year.
It is good to remember that there were some great moments in this year. Do come back for us in 2018.
I would love to.
Huh? Thanks for coming. We
Thanks,
appreciate
Brenda
it.
Williams.
Brenda
Happy New
Williams.
Year.
All right, ahead, horrific news right here in New York City.
This is the worst fire tragedy we have seen in this city in at least a quarter century.
Just awful news out of the Bronx. 12 dead, including a 1-year-old, as a fire rages through a Bronx apartment building. We're live next.
High blood pressure. It's the #1 leading cause of heart.
All right, some breaking news overnight. Fire officials in New York trying to determine what sparked the deadliest fire in the city in at least the last 25 years. At least 12 people were killed, including a 1-year-old. CNN's Scott McLean at the scene of the fire in the Bronx. Good morning, Scott.
Hey, good morning, Dave. The fire started on the first floor of this building, which is just a stone's throw away from the Bronx Zoo, just before 7 o'clock last night. The fire department responded quickly, 3 minutes or less, according to city officials, but the flames, they seemed to spread even faster. 150 firefighters ended up here battling those flames, but not everybody made it out. Those who did had to climb down those fire escapes into absolutely bone-chilling temperatures. Our local affiliates reported speaking to one woman who was waiting outside frantically because the last text that she had received from her mother said that she was stuck inside of a third-floor apartment. All told, there are 12 people confirmed to be dead. They range in age between 1 and 50 years old. There are other people who have been injured. The mayor and the fire commissioner say this is the worst fire in the city in decades.
We're here at the scene of an unspeakable tragedy. In the middle of the holiday season is a time when families are together. Tonight here in the Bronx, there are families that have been torn apart.
This tragedy is without question historic in its magnitude here, and our hearts go out to every family that lost a loved one here and everyone that's fighting for their lives.
Now, the mayor said that there still may be more fatalities from this fire because there are still people in the hospital. Now, this building, it has 29 units inside, and according to public records, it's only had 4 complaints since 2004, and none of them seem to be fire-related. Dave, obviously the cause of this is unclear. The fire department is obviously investigating.
Indeed. Mayor Bill de Blasio will be on New Day this morning. Scott McLean live for us in the Bronx. Thank you.
Oh, it's just devastating.
It is just awful. The fire department did save 12 people. You always have to take your hats off to our brave fire department.
Absolutely. All right, parting with the president and Fabio just got a little more expensive. How much more? We're going to get a check on CNN Money Stream next.
1, 2, here we go!
Town team, the Houston Rockets.
Good morning, Andy Scholes. You've got more in this morning's Bleacher Report.
Yeah, good morning, guys. You know, after the refs made the headlines after that big Christmas Day showdown between the Cavs and the Warriors, they stole the headlines again deciding this Rockets-Celtics game. Some very questionable calls at the end. Now, the Rockets, they did have a 26-point lead at one point in this, and they're up just 3 with 11 seconds left. And after a Jason Tatum dunk to make it a 1-point game, the refs called James Harden for an offensive foul, even though Marcus Smart was basically giving him a bear hug. Celtics get the ball right back. They score to take the lead. Then again, watch this, Harden called for a foul before the ball is even inbounded for the second straight play. Just unreal. Celtics win 99-98. Now, there were only 2 refs in this game because one hurt his back during warm-ups.
Harden said, you can't have just 2 officials for a big game like this.
You can't have 2 officials in a professional game. There's a lot of no calls that need to be called because that changes the dynamic of the game. It's a professional game, national TV. Can't happen.
All right, 13th ranked Stanford taking on 15th ranked TCU in the Alamo Bowl. We get to that one. The Horned Frogs, they staged a big comeback in the 4th to win a wild one, 39-37. But everyone's talking about this, what happened after the game. A kid took off his TCU shirt to reveal a Stanford shirt to take a selfie with Bryce Love. Then he put that TCU shirt back on. This is the fan in question. He tweeted the pic out afterwards. Coleman Leonard is his name. He said, come on, guys, it's the Bryce Love. To be fair, Coleman, he goes to a high school in the DFW area, and he says he's planning on applying to go to Stanford. So I guess you could wear both shirts, I guess. All right, Oklahoma State and Virginia Tech squaring off in the Camping World Bowl. Mike Gundy's team getting the win 30-21, but they failed badly when it came to hitting their coach with a Gatorade bat. Check this out. They were so late, they hit Gundy while he was shaking hands with Hokies coach Justin Fuente. So, guys, I can only imagine how mad Fuente must have been. Not only did his team lose the game, he got hit with a Gatorade bath by the opposing players.
Well, you know, when in Gundy, you have to get the mullet. So they were trying to come from behind just to get the mullet.
Do it earlier, though. I mean, come on. It's too late at that point.
That's good stuff. Thank you, my friend.
Andy.
Happy New Year to you.
You too, guys.
All right, let's get a check on CNN Money Stream this morning. The Dow ticking up yesterday 60 points. It is set to end the year with 6 straight weeks of gains. That's a first since 1954. With the holiday season wrapping up, trading was light all week. Yesterday had the second fewest amount of shares traded on any day this year. Dow and S&P futures are moving up this morning, and this is the last trading day of 2017. Partying with the president isn't cheap. The president's private club, Mar-a-Lago, raising its prices for their annual New Year's Eve bash. Tickets are up from $525 for members to $600, and for non-members, it's up to $750 from $575 last year. That is money that's going into the club. It's going into the president's pockets. In 2017, revelers not only had the opportunity to meet the president, but also celebrities like Sylvester Stallone and Dave's favorite, Fabio.
You got it.
This
Fabio.
This year, the president is expected to attend the ball again. No word on Fabio, but this, of course, raising a lot of questions about access, buying access to the president, and money going into the president's pockets because of the office that he holds.
They doubled the initiation fee in Mar-a-Lago after inauguration. All right, well, we want to thank all of you for joining us this year. It's Happy New Year for us. Our next show is on Tuesday. Thank you for being here.
It's been a great week. I'm Allison Kosick.
All right, New Day has Bill de Blasio on that tragic fire here in the Bronx, and also this intriguing New York Times interview with President Trump. We'll see you next year, everybody.
Bye.